Okay, so I think it's Women Utilities Network, in association with the Marketing Pod. You fairly recently published a white paper looking at how women in the utility sector feel they are treated. I guess it'd be good to understand what was the headline finding or findings of the work you've done.
Yeah, it was a survey. It's I think the second or third that we've done now since we founded the network. And we're always keen to find out what women feel and how it is in the sector from their perspective. And this one particularly brought out lots around unconscious bias or bias that they feel that is in the sector. And I think the key headline that seems to have stood out, because there are many key themes that come out, but the key one that's come out is that a third of women are thinking of leaving the sector, which, considering the number of women in the sector, is quite worrying that a third are considering leaving.
Yeah, so in terms of the drilling down a bit into the results, maybe if we start with the I think, I hate to say it, but the one bit of good news that perhaps seemed to be there is that women are getting, or more of them are perhaps getting, more senior roles in the organisation. So that's a positive that you perhaps want to say a little bit about.
It is good, and it is progress. And I think if you look across the sector, different parts of it are appearing to do better than others. When you look across water and you look at the number of CEOs in water versus energy, I can't think of a female CEO in energy. I think since Monica Collins stepped down, do we have a prominent CEO of a UK energy company? I don't think we do at all. But if you look across water, then water, we have 4 or 5 female CEOs, so definitely there. I think if you look at the stats, there's still a less of third of the leadership roles are women. So there is progress, absolutely, but we've still got a long way to go to get equality and equity.
Yeah, and in terms of the less good bits of the findings, we start perhaps with women feel that they are not sort of heard or valued within their organisations, and particularly, I guess, in comparison to male colleagues. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was not surprised, I suppose shocked by some of the verbatim comments in there. I think when you see people sharing stories and you read those stories, yeah, I think they don't feel that they're heard and valued in an organisation. And I would like to explore this from both sides as well, because do we feel unheard? Is that because of what people are saying around us, or that we're being blocked? Or have we witnessed it so many times that now we don't feel we have a voice, and that's stopping us from speaking? And I'm sure there's a combination of both of that. But certainly some of the verbatim that they shared, yeah, it was quite heartening to listen to some of those stories.
And in terms of the types of roles that women have within utility organisations, it seems that I won't say completely exclusively, but it seems overwhelmingly they're being given sort of administrative or organisation roles. So I guess thoughts as to why that might be, and what else, what they're missing out on, I suppose.
Yeah, and when you look at the results on that, it's a frightening statistics. It's very high. I think it was 84% of women said that they felt they were often given the administrative or organisational tasks within a company. I don't know. Is it because they're more capable? Are we getting stuff to do because they know that we're efficient and effective, in terms of getting things done? My children are grown up now, but when they were small, I worked full time, and they were at a nursery. And when they were doing a fundraising activity, the person running the nursery asked me if I would do some, organisation and volunteering. And I said, I work full time. Maybe ask somebody who's not working full time. And she just said, ask a busy woman and she'll schedule it in. And I think there's an element of, actually, if you've got this persona and you're efficient and you're organised, you attract people asking you to do tasks that need to be done. So I think, you know, I do think that's a reason why, if you're good at something, people will keep coming back to you about it. But is it a natural thing because we're women? It's really difficult to pin it out, isn't it? It is really difficult to pin it out.
So it's maybe it is a compliment, but it's perhaps you're saying it's a slightly lazy thing just to assume that's the right role or that's the thing to do. But
yeah, and maybe it's a good thing, you know, for us to volunteer to start with, and then you can never step away from the fact that you've done some of those admin things.
But perhaps one of the more, well, I'd call it disturbing, but the very startling things is that women feel they are judged very harshly, particularly, you know, if they do happen to fail at a task, they feel that, you know, they are judged very harshly. And again, I guess they're looking in comparison to perhaps if their male colleagues do something similarly, you know, unsuccessful, they're perhaps not judged as harshly. Is that right?
Yeah. And I think that's a common conversation. It's definitely come out in the survey, but that's a common conversation at some of our events when you get women talking. They feel the pressure to be successful when the spotlight's on them. And they feel that pressure not just from their male colleagues, but from their female colleagues. And that, you know, that everyone is watching. You know, the pressure to deliver and prove that as a woman, they can deliver and perform. But also the pressure because they're maybe role modeling or trailblazing for other women. And what came out of the report is also evidenced in a Sunday Times article and report around women in leadership roles, and that female CEOs are more likely to be removed from their role than male CEOs. Now, again, you can infer from that what you will. Is it because there is less tolerance for when they're not being successful? Are they giving less time to prove themselves? Yeah, so I think it's an area, I think, as a network, we will be watching and looking to maybe explore and unpick a bit further.
Yeah, and in terms of the overall picture, it would seem then that women feel, if not sort of actually poorly treated, they certainly feel very much undervalued within the organisation. Again, when they look at their male colleagues, the way they're treated, is that the sort of overriding summary of what's going on?
Yeah, and again, a lot of these things are very personal. You know, when you speak to women, no two stories are the same at all. And so I think what came out of the survey was that people feel very much undervalued, poorly treated, spoken over a lot by their male colleagues, or for people taking credit for the work that they have done. And so there's a lot to unpack around there in terms of having the confidence to claim your own success or having the confidence to continue to speak up. But it requires a lot of resilience and a lot of support. And so I think for me, reflecting on that, there are scenarios and situations where women have been in this position and haven't been able to challenge and get out of it. And it's where actually we looked at their male colleagues to say, what are you going to do to help this situation? You know, if work's been incorrectly attributed or one of your male colleagues has spoken over one of your female colleagues, you know, what are you doing as an individual to help support in that space, rather than just let it go? And I think that's one of the things we're trying to focus on with the report and the unconscious bias, is that we all do these things. And for some of us, it's more important than others about how we feel about it. So how can we work together to support one another to change things?
Yeah, moving on to that, the unconscious bias, it seems I mean, it's not necessarily a great thing to celebrate, but it does appear that it's not as if companies or individuals within them are deliberately going out of their way to penalise women, but this unconscious bias, they're just not thinking about how women within utilities have been treated. Is that right? So it's not a sort of a discrimination policy. It's just sort of thoughtlessness that is creating the situation. Is that an accurate sort of description?
That is absolutely true. I genuinely 100% don't believe anybody gets out of bed and goes into work thinking I'm going to act in a way that's really exclusive for women. That's not the case at all. I think it's a lack of awareness and some organizational disconnects around culture. So one of the benefits about being one of the founders of the Women's Network is that I get to talk to boards and CEOs around their organization, and they're very joined up on this. And I also get to talk to lots of women in the organization, and they're very, very joined up on the working culture. But there's a disconnect somewhere between that an organization has got to work on. And I think that's we all have it, depending on how we've been brought up, where we live, whether that's religion or what football team we support. We've all got this element of bias in us. And so it's about creating that awareness within the organization and giving people those seconds to stop and think about what they're saying or how they're behaving, what's acceptable and what's not. But it's not, I've never come across a case that has been absolutely, as you said, in terms of focused attempt to keep women out of the organisation or anything like that at all. It's always been down to lack of understanding.
And in terms of what to do about it, I think the white paper report, it recommends, I think, five key actions to help organisations address the situation. So perhaps you could talk us through those, if that's all right.
Yeah. 5 areas that we've recommended to focus on. One is changing the recruitment process. So there's huge amounts of research into this to ensure that the right people get the opportunity to basically get to interview. And so a form of blind recruitment process. Now, and I mean truly blind, I don't mean point scoring process where, if you're not ticking certain boxes, you're not through. It should be just on the quality of the CV. So that was our first one. Then the second one was about encouraging mindful decision making. So getting the organisation involved and making it very clear about the policies that are being made, so that people can really truly understand the commitments the organisation's making to the decisions that are being made. Because we do things, by right. We like to work with people who are similar to us. We don't like conflicts. That's humans. We naturally like to do that. So we're more likely, going back to recruitment, to recruit people like us, to put teams together that are like us. So really to think about that mindful decision making. Make training mandatory, but not just training, not just, we go on a course and we come out, and for 48 hours we might be chatting about it and excited, and it's all very fresh and new, etc. But then we'll forget about it. So if we're going to do something around unconscious bias and awareness, then what else happens when we're back in the workplace? What other interventions are we doing? What are we doing to help people on their way? Because we know that we're creatures of habit, and if it doesn't become a new habit, it won't stick. The other one was around advocacy and to promote advocacy. So going back to my example where a man may talk over a woman in a meeting, another man in the room could speak up and say, actually, can we hear what Hayley said, let her finish, and to support in that way. So it gives people the opportunity to support women in an environment maybe where they don't feel as supported or they don't feel as heard as they should do. And building on that, the last one was about holding people to account and being accountable for what they say. So when people are stereotyping or blocking or claiming work success, for work that they didn't complete, that somebody can hold them accountable for the language they've used or how they've approached it or what they've said. And I think if we see more of those things, and they might only seem very small things, but I think if we see more of those consistently applied in the workplace, it will change the environment that we all work in for the good. So it'll be a nicer place for everybody, but it will make it a better environment and culture for women to thrive in.
And in terms of changing things, I guess how optimistic or not are you? I mean, it does seem that most companies, if not all, have some kind of diversity, equality, inclusion policies or focus. So are you optimistic that those will actually deliver, or do you worry perhaps that it's a tick box exercise because it has to appear in their annual report that we are focusing on this area, and they're perhaps not following up that little sentence in the report with actual action? I guess, as I say, how optimistic are you that change can be made or continue to be made, or are you a bit pessimistic that it's a long road ahead, shall we say?
I think a mixture of all of what you said there. So firstly, I'm by nature I'm an optimist. So and I think founding a women's network in a sector that, I think when we started this 6 years ago, 15% of the workforce were women. So I think you've got to be an optimist to start that in the first place. When it comes to what organisations are doing, for me, there is an element of tick box. So you've got a women's network, so you've got a BAME group, kind of, so what are you doing with it? And what are the actions out of it? So is it just for your CSR report to say that you're doing these things, but what are they doing? And how are they supported? Because if a women's network is just ran by women, and a BAME network or a Pride network, whatever it is, it just attracts those people. They're still the minority in the organisation. So how do they influence the majority? And that partly comes down to policies. Having a policy there sets the boundary for an organisation to operate in and for its people to be held accountable to. But the practices and how they do things and the culture, and whether people operating in an exclusive way is tolerated, that's then how successful the organisation will be. So I think I'm optimistic because we're moving forward. I'm optimistic because we are getting the policies in place. What I want to see is the practices and the culture and the environment changing in line with those policies. That will make a real difference. And I think we're at the point now where this is a whole company thing to do. We need to do it together. And that's what will make the difference.
And is the most important thing, I mean, the unconscious bias, I think, well, hopefully most people, whether it's when you rocked up at university and met a whole load of people from completely different backgrounds and challenged half the assumptions that you'd sort of, inherited from your parents or your school environment. Do you think that's the most important thing, almost getting people to sit down together and just explain, their thoughts and backgrounds so that people understand that there are, different perspectives on the workplace, as opposed to just carrying on with all the assumptions they've inherited? Is that the most important thing, or are there other things?
Yeah, I think that awareness that there's a different way, there's a different view. That for me, that's crucial to working together. If we look back at history, conflict or challenge is where things happen, where you get big change is some form of conflict. It's difficult to make that massive transformational change through just, harmony alone. So I think we do have to see some activism, people just driving activity. But people coming out of university, it's interesting with university, because I think the younger people coming out almost seem to just have this worked out. You know, it is just how they do things. You know, you're just another human to them. They're not looking at your color, your sexuality, your gender. You're just another human. I think actually it is the older generation who haven't had that as part of their education that are maybe struggling to adapt. And so by the very nature of that, I suppose over the next generation, we will see huge change.
Yeah. Well, it's been lovely to chat, and some brilliant insights into obviously the report itself, but more generally what's going on in the sector. So Hayley, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks very much.